So in this section, I just want to talk a little bit about hair. Now, as you're watching this, I want you to imagine that this, first, as you take a look at this image, also, well, those of you, first off, with your books, if you flip to page, what is that page? Page 158, there's some images that'll kind of help you follow along with this, and there's descriptions that start on page 157. Okay, but if you don't have your book in front of you or you don't have the book at all, just kind of picture this upper green portion as the epidermis. All this down here where is the dermis, and then where I kind of have these black circles are representing adipose tissue, so that'd be the hypodermis. All right. So when you take a look at the structure of hair, well, let's just talk about hair in general first before I get into the structure. I mean, hair on humans. When it comes to hair on humans, we don't use hair like other animals tend to. If you look at animals, very primitive animals that are out in the wild, for their entire lives, they have a lot more hair on their bodies and for the purpose of staying warm. All right. Whereas us humans, we do have hair all over our bodies, but not in thick enough portions to really help us maintain heat. All right. So basically, we use the hairs on our skin for sensation purposes. And the hair on our head is thick enough to help us retain heat. It does help because, remember, heat does rise. And, that's why, for example, if you go camping in the wintertime and you really want to stay warm in the tent and the sleeping bag, put a cap on your head. You'd be amazed at the difference it makes. So realistically, humans use hair more for sensation than anything else. Like I said, the hair on the head does work for heat retention and protection from the sunlight as well. All right, so we take a look at hair. Basically, the hairs are found in, originate in the dermis and then extend all the way up through the epidermis and then protrude out the epidermis. And they're exposed to the, part of it is exposed to the air of the external world. All right. Now, if you want to look at the basic anatomic structure of a hair, there are three parts. There's a shaft, there's a root, and then there's a bulb. All right. Now, basically, hair growth is very similar to that of the epidermis. Remember when we discussed the epidermis, we said that there are cells that are, that there are cells in the basal, the basement, the lower layer, that divide rapidly, and as the new cells divide, old cells are pushed up and away. All right. So, hair turnover and growth is very, very similar to that of the epidermis. Okay. So first, let's start our focus on the bulb and then just work our way up. All right. Now, the bulb of a hair, for starters, has an invagination kind of caused by some force of the dermis in there, and this invagination inside the bulb of the hair is called the hair papilla. All right, and within this papilla, there's a fairly dense network of capillaries in here. All right, so remember, just like the basement membrane of the epidermis of our skin, all right, there's a network of capillaries just under that as well. All right, so basically we circulate blood to the bulb of the hair where the bulk of the living cells are located. All right, so these cells, that are turning over all the time have a source of oxygen, a source of nutrients, and also a means to eliminate waste. All right, so that's what the hair papilla is used for. And then, like I said, basically all the living hair cells that are found towards the lowest aspects of the bulb, all right, as they divide, the older cells are just pushed up and away. And just like the cells of the epidermis, as they get pushed farther away from the capillaries within the papilla, they're going to die, and they're going to become keratinized in hard, tough cells. So then once you extend upward from the bulb of the hair, you next get the root. So the root, basically as this kind of fatter bulb starts to bulge up, starts to kind of curve upward, higher in the dermis, it's gonna reach a certain point where it's gonna thin dramatically. Okay, and where it thins and then starts to protrude upward throughout the dermis, that's what we call the root. Okay, so the part of the hair that's traveling from the bulb up through the span of the dermis is the root of the hair. All right, and attached to and there's a decent amount of stuff going on here with the root of the hair. For starters, there is remember we talked about sebaceous glands in the sweat gland video. Remember we said sebaceous glands aren't sweat glands per se, but they are oil secreting glands that move their secretions, up the root of hair and up the shaft to keep hair moist. Again, it is it does act as kind of a natural antibiotic to kill bacteria and things like that. All right. So sebaceous glands are found along the root of a hair, and then also you have what's called a piloerector muscle that is kind of anchored to the, somewhere to the dermis and the epidermis and to the root of the hair as well. All right. Now, and then also you see what's called a root hair plexus. So typically, there's going to be a nerve that kind of wraps around and forms kind of kind of like a neural wrapping around the root of the hair at some point in time. Now the root hair plexus and the piloerector muscles have a relationship with one another. All right. So what happens? Now, like I mentioned earlier, that our hairs are used for sensation purposes. All right. So, for example, when you feel a bug crawling on your skin, all right, these insects these bugs are too light. They're not big enough and heavy enough to put enough pressure on the skin to stimulate your pressure receptors in the epidermis and deep down in the dermis. All right. So it's not the physical contact they make with your skin. All right. What happens when you feel a bug crawling on your skin? It's when they bend the shaft of the hair. The shaft of the hair is the portion of the hair that protrudes out of the epidermis and is exposed to the outside world. Okay. And as the shaft of the hair bends, all right, that's going to stimulate the nerves of the root hair plexus. And then that's going to send impulses to your brain, and that's when you feel an object crawling on your skin. A small object like a tick or a spider or a beetle, whatever it is crawling on you. All right, and you can, if you take your hand and just run it ever so gently over the hairs, you can feel that little tickling feeling. All right, that's you bending the hairs and stimulating the nerves of the root hair plexus. All right, and also there are certain situations in which we use this piloerector muscle. And basically, this piloerector muscle is involuntary smooth muscle. All right, remember, there are three types of muscle tissue in the body. There's skeletal muscle, which is attached to your bones, which we have voluntary control over. There is cardiac muscle, which is only found in the heart. And then there's smooth muscle, which you find lining hollow organs, okay, or in close proximity to these hairs. All right, and the smooth muscle that's attached to the root of the hair, again, the piloerector muscle, you do not have conscious control over that. Remember, smooth muscles you don't consciously control. And remember, pilo means hair, all right, and then erector, means upright. Sorry, I can't spell today. It means upright. Right, like as in writing. All right. So when this muscle contracts, all right, your hairs are going to this piloerector muscle is going to contract and shorten, and it's going to pull on the hair. It's going to create a little bulge on your skin, and the hairs are going to go. They're going to stand upright. All right, and that's what you call goosebumps. All right. Now, typically, in humans, this happens, when we get really cold, or for any high stress situation like fear, anxiety, something like that. Okay, and again, this is a sympathetic nervous system response. As I mentioned earlier when I talked about control of sweat, the sympathetic nervous system is activated in situations when we are experiencing stress. Okay, now in humans, the hair standing up really is insignificant because we just don't have enough hair on our arms for this purpose. But for example, if you have a cat, all right, if you have a cat or a dog, let's say after watching this video, you want to see this, or, you decide to go home and annoy your dog or cat, and just basically tick them off. All right. And then what they're going to do is, like, let's use the cat as an example. I have a cat named Gizmo, so we'll use her as an example. So let's say I go home and I just drive Gizmo nuts, all right, or I make her afraid, to the point where she feels threatened. And what she's going to do is she's going to stand on the, almost on, would be the equivalent of our tiptoes. She's going to arch her back up really high. She's going to show her teeth. She's going to hiss. She's going to stick her tail up in the air. Okay, dogs have somewhat of a similar reaction when they're threatened. They'll stick their back up as much as they can. They'll turn their shoulders outward, and they want to look big and bulky and mean, show their teeth, growl at you. Okay. Now, what those animals are trying to do is they're trying to look bigger and more threatening. All right. So when Gizmo, when she sticks her back up in the air like that, she's also, when she's threatened like that, the hairs on her back are also going to stand up, all right? And that's, like I said, every little bit counts when it comes to an animal being threatened, and that's going to make it look, larger, more intimidating as well, and will hopefully ward off whatever is threatening her. All right, but like I said, humans, we don't have thick enough hair on ourselves to really, to really take on that threatening look. So basically, this is just a way of our body, this is just the way we figure out, okay, well, we're cold. All right. So that's what we use piloerector muscles for. What else do I want to talk about here? Let's see. What else did I want to discuss? Piloerector muscles. Also, that as we age, that our changes in the amount and distribution of hair, varies throughout certain points in time in life. And basically, there are two major factors that affect hair growth. Okay, and that are basically. Oh, again, I can't spell. Sorry, folks. The first factor that affects hair growth is hormones, and the other factor is nutrition. Okay, there are certain situations, because there are certain times when hair growth occurs more frequently than others. Like, for example, puberty. When you're going through those hormonal changes of puberty, that's going to stimulate hair growth, especially in certain, the reproductive and the pubic and the axillary areas of the body. And also nutritional status will affect hair growth. If you are deficient in protein, all right, you're not going to have enough protein to make keratin, which is, just like the epidermis, as these cells die, as they get pushed farther away from the basal area of the bulb, they're going to accumulate keratin, and that's what gives hair its kind of solid features. All right, if you don't have enough protein to drive this process in the form of keratin, hair growth is going to dramatically slow. All right, and that could cause thinning of the hair. And there are certain situations where the immune system does attack hair, and it kind of falls out in patchy areas, alopecia, areata to be specific, but that's rare. You really don't need to worry about that. Your book just mentions that. But yeah, so basically eat protein. So what else do I want to say about that? And when people start to, when people lose hair, when people start to go bald, they call that alopecia. Okay, alopecia. Basically, how you lose hair, how you go bald, basically depends. That's a sex-linked inherited, gene that can determine if you're going to go bald or not. And what else do I want to say about that? I just don't want to go too in depth with the hairs because there just isn't a ton you have to know about these. So, but alopecia is when you start to lose hair. And remember, women can go bald as well. I mean, remember when I was young growing up, we never talked about women going bald, but it does happen. They can go through those hormonal changes of life as well. Basically, there are certain byproducts of testosterone that levels that can change as you age, and that could basically what it does is it stunts the growth of hair to the point where it'll stop, coming out of the skin and, causing the baldness. Let's see here. What do I want to say about that? I think that's about all I really care to talk about with hair. I mean, like I said, there isn't a ton you really need to know about that. I don't really care my students, they'll, focus on, the vellus hair versus terminal hair, all that stuff. Just understand the basic functions of hair and kind of, like I said, the basic parts of hair. All right.